The war was over. That was the truth written in the Dominion's records, in the ruins of Earth, in the silence of humanity's lost colonies. The great fleets of mankind had burned in the dark, crushed under the relentless assault of an empire that saw them as nothing more than a threat to be erased. The Galactic Council had declared the war a necessary act, a lesson to any species that dared to challenge the balance of power. And so, the galaxy moved on, believing that humanity was nothing more than a name in the pages of history. But history is not written in words alone. It is written in the ruins of battles, in the whispers of survivors, and in the embers of vengeance that refuse to die. Far beyond the reaches of known space, in the graveyard of forgotten battles, something stirred. Deep within the wreckage of an abandoned war zone, where old ships floated like the bones of a dead civilization, a single vessel remained intact. It had drifted for years, silent and unnoticed, a ghost among the wreckage. Then, without warning, its lights flickered to life. Engines that had been dead for decades rumbled as power surged through the ship's systems. Inside the cold steel walls of the ISS Revenant, one by one, figures emerged, weak, disoriented, but alive. Commander Elias Voss opened his eyes to the dim red glow of emergency lights. His breath was shaky, his body numb from years of cryosleep, but his mind was sharp. He had expected death. When the final battle over Earth had ended in flames, when humanity's last fleets had been shattered, he had prepared to die with his crew. But fate had other plans. As his vision cleared, he saw the others, his officers, his soldiers, the last survivors of a species that should have been extinct. They had been left for dead, forgotten in the darkness of space. But now, against all odds, they were awake. And in that moment, Voss knew one thing for certain: the war was not over. The ship's AI, damaged but operational, began processing old data. Reports flooded the screen. Earth was gone, the colonies erased, and the Dominion had declared victory years ago. Humanity was extinct in the eyes of the galaxy. The thought sent a cold rage through Voss's veins. The Dominion had not simply defeated them. They had erased them, wiped them from history as if they had never existed. But they had made one mistake. They had left survivors. And survivors had nothing to lose. The Revenant had limited supplies, failing power, and no allies. The crew was small, barely enough to keep the ship operational. They had no reinforcements, no fleet, and no home to return to. But what they did have was knowledge. Before the war had ended, Earth scientists had been working on experimental weapons, tactics, and stealth technology. The Revenant had been part of those secret projects, a prototype vessel meant to strike behind enemy lines. Its systems were outdated, but its design was unique, a warship built for survival, for adaptation, for vengeance. Voss wasted no time. He gathered his crew, the last remnants of humanity's military, and made their mission clear. They were not going to run. They were not going to hide. If the galaxy believed humanity was gone, then they would use that to their advantage. They would move in the shadows, strike where the enemy least expected, and remind the Dominion of the one truth they had ignored: humanity did not surrender. Their first objective was simple: find resources, gather intelligence, and test the limits of their old ship. The Revenant scanners detected a Dominion outpost on the edge of a nearby star system, a small station meant for supply runs. It was lightly defended, not expecting an attack. After all, who would dare challenge the Dominion now? That arrogance would be their downfall. The Revenant approached in silence, its old stealth systems barely holding together. Dominion patrol ships floated lazily around the station, their crews relaxed, unaware of the storm about to break. Voss and his team moved swiftly. Using scavenged Dominion codes from old battle records, they slipped past the first layer of security. Then, like a beast waking from hibernation, the Revenant struck. The attack was fast and merciless. The first barrage disabled the station's communications, cutting them off from calling reinforcements. The second wave targeted the weapon systems, leaving them defenseless. Before the Dominion soldiers even understood what was happening, the Revenant's crew had boarded. Silent and efficient, the last soldiers of humanity moved through the corridors, eliminating resistance with brutal precision. Within minutes, the outpost was theirs. Voss stood in the command center, staring at the Dominion officer trembling before him. The alien's eyes were wide with disbelief. This is impossible, he stammered. You're supposed to be extinct. Voss's voice was calm, cold as the void itself. You should have made sure. With a single shot, the officer collapsed. The outpost was secured. The Revenant now had weapons, fuel, and data. More importantly, they had sent a message. Someone, somewhere, would notice the missing station. Whispers would spread. Questions would be asked. And soon, fear would follow. As the crew worked, Voss looked at the stars beyond the viewport. The Dominion thought they had won. The Galactic Council thought they had erased humanity. But they had only created something far worse. Humanity had not been defeated. It had been reforged in the fire of war, stripped of weakness, and left with only one purpose. The galaxy had written humanity's obituary. But now, in the depths of space, the last survivors of Earth had reignited their engines. And the war was just beginning. The galaxy had moved on. The Dominion had wiped Earth from existence, burned its cities to ash, and shattered its fleets in the cold depths of space. The Galactic Council had watched in silence, unwilling to challenge the power of an empire that had crushed an entire species. Humanity was gone, erased, forgotten. For years, the universe carried on as if mankind had never existed. Planets were colonized, wars were fought, trade routes expanded, and yet, in the vastness of space, there were whispers. Rumors of abandoned human warships drifting in the void. Stories of missing Dominion patrols near old battlefields. Some called them myths, legends of a species that had died refusing to kneel. Others dismissed them as nonsense, the fantasies of those who still feared humanity's wrath. But deep in the forgotten corners of the galaxy, where the Dominion never looked, the truth was far more terrifying. Among the wreckage of a lost war, a single ship remained. The ISS Revenant, a war vessel thought to be destroyed, had survived. It had drifted in the dark for years, its systems barely operational, its crew locked in cryosleep. But the ship was not dead. It waited, silent and patient, like a predator in the deep. And one day, without warning, it awakened. Deep within its steel hulls, the hum of power returned. Flickering lights illuminated rusted corridors, and in the cryochambers, the last remnants of a forgotten race stirred. Commander Elias Voss gasped as he emerged from his frozen sleep, his lungs burning as he took his first breath in years. His body was weak, his mind clouded, but as he looked around and saw the others awakening, he knew one thing: he was not alone. His crew, his soldiers, the last survivors of humanity's final war, had not perished. The Dominion had left them for dead, abandoned them in the cold void, believing their war was over. But as Voss stood, forcing strength back into his limbs, he understood the truth. The war was not over. It had only been waiting for the right moment to begin again. The Revenant systems were barely holding together, its weapons offline, its engines struggling to function. The ship had been designed for stealth, a prototype vessel meant to infiltrate enemy lines and strike from the shadows. That design had saved them. When Earth had fallen, the Revenant had been damaged in the battle but not destroyed. It had drifted beyond known space, unnoticed, forgotten, like the ghosts of the men and women who once fought on its decks. But now, with its crew awake and the galaxy unaware of their survival, they had a chance to rise from the grave and remind the Dominion that humanity had never been so easy to kill. Voss moved through the corridors, his mind racing. They needed supplies, fuel, weapons. They needed intelligence. The last battle had been years ago, and the galaxy had changed. But if the Dominion still ruled, then humanity's enemies still walked free, believing themselves victorious. That mistake would cost them. Voss gathered his crew, their faces hardened with the weight of what had been taken from them. Some had lost families, others had watched their homeworld burn. Now, they stood together, the last remnants of a species that should have died, and Voss saw the same fire in their eyes that had once driven humanity to defy the impossible. Their first step was to find out what had become of the Dominion. The Revenant's long-range sensors picked up a small relay station orbiting a desolate moon. It was unguarded, a minor outpost used for data transmission. It would be their first target. They moved swiftly, the ship's failing cloaking systems barely holding as they approached. The station's crew, Dominion officers who had grown complacent in the absence of war, never saw them coming. A quick, silent assault left the outpost under human control, its defenders dead before they could even send a distress signal. Voss and his team scoured the station's records, their hands tightening into fists as they read the data. The Dominion had erased humanity from history. No records of Earth remained in the archives. No mention of the war, no acknowledgement of the genocide. It was as if humanity had never existed. The Dominion had not only destroyed them, they had wiped them from memory, ensuring that no one would ever speak of the species that had once defied them. Rage burned in Voss's chest, but it was not blind anger. It was cold, focused. The Dominion had wanted humanity to be forgotten. That would not happen. They found something else in the station's archives reports, of human refugees, scattered in the far reaches of the galaxy. Not all had perished. Some had survived, hiding, living in secret, afraid to reveal themselves. The Dominion had hunted them for years, but many had slipped through their grasp. The whispers of humanity's ghosts had been more than just rumors. Voss knew what had to be done. The Revenant would not fight alone. If there were survivors, they would find them. If there were others who still carried the fire of Earth in their hearts, they would rise. As they left the outpost, setting it to self-destruct to cover their tracks, Voss looked at the endless void ahead. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and hunted by an empire that believed them extinct. But extinction was a choice, and humanity had never been the kind to accept defeat. The ghosts of a dead race had awakened. And soon, the galaxy would remember why they had once feared the name of mankind. The Dominion had erased their history, but history is not written by the victors alone. It is written by those who refuse to be silenced, by those who stand against the tide and carve their legacy into the stars. Humanity had been forgotten, but not for much longer. The galaxy had declared humanity extinct. The Dominion had wiped Earth from existence, reducing it to nothing but dust floating in the void. The last human warships had been hunted down, their wreckage drifting in silence, cold and lifeless. The Galactic Council had watched without interference, unwilling to challenge the might of an empire that had proven itself merciless. No one spoke of mankind anymore. Their name had been erased from records, their history buried under the weight of time. The Dominion had won, or so they believed. But deep in the forgotten corners of the universe, where no Dominion patrols ventured, where old battlefields lay untouched, and the ruins of war remained undisturbed, something stirred. In the wreckage of a long-abandoned warship, lights flickered to life. A vessel once thought dead, silent for years, suddenly roared with renewed energy. Deep within its cold steel corridors, cryogenic pods hissed open, releasing the last survivors of a species that had refused to die. Commander Elias Voss collapsed to the ground as he pulled himself out of the cryopod, his body trembling from years of frozen sleep. His breath came in ragged gasps, his limbs weak, but his mind was awake. The ship was still intact. That meant others had survived too. He forced himself to stand, his vision blurry as he staggered toward the control panels. Around him, more pods opened and figures emerged his crew, the last remnants of humanity's warriors, awakening in the heart of the graveyard that the galaxy had forgotten. They were supposed to be dead. That was what the Dominion had ensured. But they had failed. Humanity had not been eradicated. It had been waiting. The ship's AI flickered online, its damaged systems barely holding together, but the data was clear. Decades had passed. The war was over. Earth was gone. The Dominion had declared total victory. The Galactic Council had accepted it without question. There were no remaining human colonies, no fleets, no resistance. Humanity had been erased from history itself. Voss clenched his fists, his teeth grinding together as he processed the truth. The Dominion had not simply destroyed them. They had ensured that no one even remembered they had ever existed. But history is not written by those who erase. It is written by those who endure. The ship, the ISS Revenant, was damaged but functional. It had drifted unseen for years, forgotten in the ruins of war, its stealth technology keeping it hidden. It had been a prototype vessel, designed for deep infiltration, for sabotage, for war in the shadows. Now, it was the last surviving relic of a species that had once ruled the stars. But relics do not bring fear. Ghosts do. And that was what they would become. Voss gathered his crew in the war room, their faces hardened by loss, their eyes filled with something the Dominion had believed impossible resolve. They were the last of their kind. There were no reinforcements, no allies, no home to return to. But that did not mean the war was over. It meant it had changed. They could not fight in open battle, could not match the Dominion in strength. But war was not always won by strength alone. The galaxy believed humanity to be extinct, and that was an advantage no army could buy. They would move in silence, strike from the shadows, become the unseen nightmare that the Dominion had convinced itself did not exist. Their first target was a Dominion supply station, a minor outpost on the edge of the sector, lightly defended and insignificant in the eyes of the Empire. The perfect place to begin. The Revenant moved like a ghost, its old cloaking systems barely holding together but just enough to slip past the outpost sensors. Dominion officers patrolled lazily, unaware that death had come for them in the form of the Forgotten. The attack was swift and merciless. Voss and his team moved through the corridors with precision, their stolen weapons firing without hesitation. Within minutes, the outpost was silent. No alarms had been triggered. No warnings had been sent. The Dominion would not even know they had been there. They downloaded everything tactical data, supply routes, classified Dominion reports. And that was when they found something they had not expected. Humans. Not dead. Not extinct. But hidden. Scattered across the galaxy, remnants of their people had survived in the shadows, in the slums of alien worlds, in secret, living under false identities, hunted and afraid. The Dominion had not found them all. Humanity was not gone. It was just waiting to rise. Voss looked at the data, his mind already forming a plan. This was no longer just about vengeance. It was about rebirth. They would find the survivors, gather them, arm them, prepare them. The Dominion believed their enemy was long dead, but they had made a fatal mistake. They had left ghosts behind, and ghosts had a way of returning. The crew of the Revenant erased every trace of their presence, leaving behind only empty corridors and a silent station. They had no intention of being known. Not yet. The time for open war would come, but for now, they would remain the whispers in the dark, the fear in the Dominion's heart, the unseen force moving in the shadows. As they left, Voss stood at the viewport, staring into the vast emptiness ahead. They had no home, no allies, no armies. But they had something far more powerful purpose. Humanity had not been defeated. It had been reborn in silence, in darkness, in the fire of a war that the galaxy had thought ended. The Dominion had won the last war, but the next one had just begun. The galaxy had long forgotten the name of humanity. The Dominion had wiped them from existence, erased their history, and silenced their defiance in a war that had ended with the destruction of Earth. No human fleets remained, no colonies stood to resist, and no record spoke of their once mighty civilization. The Dominion believed the war was over. They had declared victory and moved on, ruling the stars without opposition. But history is not shaped by the victors alone. It is shaped by those who refuse to die. Deep in the cold void, hidden among the wreckage of forgotten battles, a lone warship stirred. The ISS Revenant, a prototype vessel built for stealth and infiltration, had survived where all others had perished. For years, it had remained silent, drifting in the shadows, its crew locked in cryosleep, waiting for the right moment to awaken. And now, that moment had come. Commander Elias Voss stood on the bridge, his body still weak from years of frozen slumber, but his mind sharp as ever. Around him, his crew, once soldiers of a doomed war, moved with quiet determination. They had no reinforcements, no allies, and no home to return to. But they had something far more dangerous, nothing left to lose. The Dominion believed them extinct, which meant they had the advantage of surprise. And tonight, they would use it. Their target was a Dominion supply station orbiting a barren moon, a small but vital link in the Empire's logistics network. It was lightly defended, its security relaxed after years of uncontested rule. No one expected an attack. No alarms had been set for enemies that no longer existed. And that was why it would be the perfect place to make the first strike. The Revenant moved through the darkness, its damaged cloaking systems barely holding together, but just enough to remain unseen. They approached like ghosts, silent and deadly. Voss and his team boarded the station without resistance, moving through the corridors with practiced precision. The Dominion officers on duty were unprepared, their weapons holstered, their minds dulled by routine. They had spent too long believing they were safe. The first shots were fired without warning. Suppressed rifles whispered death into the halls, and one by one, the guards fell before they could even scream. The humans moved quickly, clearing room after room with ruthless efficiency. There was no mercy here, no hesitation. The Dominion had shown humanity none when they burned Earth to ash. Now, they would receive the same in return. Within minutes, the control center was theirs. Voss stood over the station commander, a Dominion officer who had lived his entire life under the belief that humanity was dead. The fear in his alien eyes told him he now understood the truth. Voss leaned in, his voice low, almost calm. "You erased us from history." But history does not forget so easily. The officer had no time to respond before a single shot ended his life. The crew worked fast, downloading classified Dominion data, gathering intelligence on supply routes, fleet movements, and the locations of hidden human survivors. The Dominion had not found all of them. Scattered across the galaxy, remnants of humanity still existed, hiding in the shadows, waiting for a day that seemed as though it would never come. But now, the Forgotten had returned, and the first strike was only the beginning. Before leaving, Voss ordered the station's destruction. Explosives were set, countdowns initiated, and as they retreated back to the Revenant, the station behind them erupted in fire, breaking apart in a silent explosion that scattered debris into the void. By the time Dominion forces realized what had happened, there would be nothing left to find. No witnesses. No evidence. Only whispers of a name they had long tried to forget. The Revenant disappeared back into the darkness. Voss stood at the viewport, staring into the endless expanse ahead. The Dominion still ruled. Their fleets still dominated the stars. But something had changed tonight. The silence of the Forgotten had been broken. The first strike had been made. And now, the war that the Dominion thought had ended was about to begin again. Humanity was no longer gone. They were rising. And the galaxy would soon remember why they had once feared them.